Have you seen me dice bag? The Grognard Files.
Hello, my name is Dirk the Dice, and this is the Grognard Files podcast, talking bobbins about tabletop RPGs from back in the day. This is part 2 of the Stormbringer episode, a supplement featuring all the bits that didn't quite fit in the first part. It's a kind of supplement that's more accurately referred to as a companion. In this Micro-Grog pod, although it isn't that small, we'll be heading to the Games Master's Tower and looking at some of the supplements for Stormbringer RPG. And then I'll be going down to the shed to meet Eddy, who's been collecting Stormbringer stuff over the past couple of years. We've also done an extra bit where we have a light-hearted look at some of the Moorcock stuff in our collection. Regular listeners will know that my gaming group, known as the Armchair Adventurers, have been playing together since about 1982, which, according to listener Andrew Jones, makes us Tier 2 grognards. We weren't around when the hobby first began, so we rode the second wave. We've rediscovered RPGs in the past few years, and this podcast is about revisiting the old games and published scenarios. Now then, with Stormbringer, other than the core rules, we didn't have any of the supplements back in the day. We used to write our own scenarios. We used to steal things from Moorcock's books. This podcast has been an opportunity to read some of that stuff that was produced for the game that we missed out on the first time. Getting reacquainted with the game has made us really enthusiastic to play these adventures. Oh, if only we could conquer time and space. We've had some more iTunes reviews. We've particularly encouraged to learn that we're inspiring people to start playing again. Here's Gavnard. What a fantastic find! Listening to the Grognard Files has given me the impetus to actually get out of the armchair, stop merely reading the rulebooks, and actually start gaming again. And it's every bit as fun as my memory and the Armchair Adventurers suggest. He goes on to describe us as some sort of rhubarb crumble with custard. We've previously been described and compared to a jammy dodger. So it's good to know that the podcast is exporting British comfort food around the world. I didn't realise that you could only see iTunes reviews from the UK, and you need to change the country view to see the others. We've been reviewed in Canada, Australia, Germany, and this one has just been added by Hyperletic from the Golden State in the USA. I really love this podcast. Dirk and the gang focus on the same games from the 80s that I loved. RuneQuest, Stormbringer and Traveller, but from a British perspective versus my Californian one. It's a lot of nostalgic fun to hear their perspective on the games 30 years later, and particularly interesting to hear the areas where the experience differed between the two countries. Thanks for these reviews. If you're listening right now and you like what you're hearing, well then please do add some stars and a review to iTunes. After all, Apple have nothing else to tax them other than creating complicated algorithms to help more listeners find us. I've had some listener contributions, and I'm going to put them in the POSTBAG section at the end of this. Until then, I better head up those 888 steps to the summit of the Games Master's Tower. Go on, Ramblers, let's get rambling.
Games Master screen.
Welcome, Blythy.
Hello, Dirk.
Welcome to the inner octagon of the Games Master's Tower for this Stormbringer episode. I don't have a Stormbringer screen, Blythy. I'm sorry about that.
Did they ever do one?
I think they made one for the Elric exclamation mark version.
Oh, right, yeah.
But I've not got it.
No.
So I've made my own with a ring binder. I've taken the pull-out reference sheets out of the third edition, and I put them in plastic folders Have you noticed they like flop over,
Yes.
and it'll annoy me that.
Yeah.
So I'll end up removing it and exposing myself.
Nothing worse than an exposed games master.
No, so I'll put that to one side. You can do without a screen.
Yeah.
I'll use my arm to cover my secrets.
I wouldn't read them anyway. I'm a mature player. I would never read a games master's secrets. It spoils it for everybody, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Right, I've got a table, a very special table. It's a table of my own devising, and it contains all the published delights in the Stormbringer canon. It's even got the Citadel miniatures that they made back in '87.
Oh, yeah.
Pantagian army.
Yeah.
Apparently,
it wasn't an army. I think they made about 6.
Yeah,
Not quite an army, is it? Crack commandos, but not an army.
it's very hard to get hold of Tangle Bones.
Is it?
Yeah, very hard to get hold of Tangle
Why?
Bones.
The figure? Oh,
The figure,
right, not the,
yeah.
no,
Tangle Bones.
slippery customer. The tangly bones, isn't it?
It's got everything here. So it's got the Rogue Mistress, which is a campaign that spans the planes of the multiverse. And I think I keep calling it Eddy Elric. I think Eddy wants to.
He's
run
like confused.
I think Eddy wants to run that one, doesn't he, at some point? So we've got that the Rogue Mistress. I've even put some Elric exclamation mark ones in here as well.
All right.
The Bronze Grimoire with spells and ancient artifacts to spice up your campaign. There's too many to choose from, so we're going to call on the Lords of Chaos to help us. Okay, I've brought along my Cursed Dice Cup.
The Cursed Dice Cup, yeah.
Okay, I've got 2 dice, and I'm using 2 8-sided dice.
Excellent. Better than D6s.
Yeah. Well, you like the D66 so much that I've created
A D88.
a D88. Yeah. So you can determine the supplements. Okay, that we're going to go. All right, are you ready to roll?
I'm ready to go.
I'll go for it. And it's 72. Hawk Moon. Science and sorcery in Earth's far future. And of course, this was part of Eddy's Dragon Meat haul. I've taken it out of its plastic bag
Yes.
because last time it was a bit crinkly. I mean, we like a bit of crunch, but
No,
there's
not
a
that
limit.
much.
And this was the last box set that was produced by KCM, but I don't have the box. It was published in 1985 and written by Carrie Campbell Robson with Sandy Peterson. And it's notable for being one of the first RPGs that was written by a woman, so which is a bit alarming when you think it's like 10 years on.
Yes. Yeah.
I think D&D came out in 75 and this was 85. So it's probably more accurately described as a supplement for Stormbringer, as it uses the same core rules and the background characteristics have been adapted to suit the world. But it's a standalone game. You don't need Stormbringer to play it, and it's set in the world of Hawkmoon. Now I know that Hawkmoon is your favourite character other than Elric.
He is, yeah. I enjoyed the Hawkmoon books. Yeah, they're good books. They kind of hang together, I think, a little bit better than a lot of the other stuff. The Elric stuff, the Elric books are better. The Elric stories are better, and Elric's a better character. But what I liked about the Hawkmoon stuff is that it's a series of books, one after the other, so it's a kind of proper series, whereas the Elric stuff is bits and pieces, isn't it? There's bits from magazines and the stories that are all sort of a bit piecemeal. But yeah, I like a bit of Hawkmoon.
So the Young Kingdoms are set in the prehistory, aren't they? Earth's prehistory, prior to some devastating event that's going to wipe out civilization as we know it. Hawkmoon is almost the reverse of that, isn't it? It's our world following a devastating event that's happened long ago.
We're not sure what. It's kind of it's alluded to that it's some kind of terrible nuclear war, isn't it? You know, but that's never entirely clear, I don't think.
Because the place that is America now is inhabited by mutants, isn't it? And religious fanatics.
Yes.
It's set in the far future, and it's a future where science exists, but it's viewed as a form of magic, and the political system has been replaced by a feudal type system. So It's known as the Tragic Millennium, and in the box set you get this great fold-out map, like the one you get with the...
Yeah, you get a map of Europe, a kind of post-apocalyptic Europe that you've got, and Great Britain, which is Great Britain, is a kind of unpleasant place, isn't it? Kind of full of sort of debauched, unpleasant, crazy kind of place, isn't it? Like an evil empire sort of thing. Yeah.
I think where the supplement comes into its own is talking about Gran Britain, because I think it kind of gives lots of good background material for baddies, because that's what they are, aren't they?
They're the baddies. Again, much like the real Great Britain. Very accurate, isn't it?
Well, there's like these different orders, isn't there? So it's you're born into a caste, and depending on your caste, you wear this mask that has like a filter.
Yeah, but it's a funny game, I think, because the game it's very good, and obviously if you can play Stormbringer, you can play this because the rule system is essentially the same, isn't it? But it's a game that kind of reeks of potential, isn't it? Because it never really went anywhere, did it? The Hawkmoon game. I don't think there's many supplements for it or anything like that, is there?
There's the Sheltered Isle, which is pitched as an Eternal Champion supplement, which means you can play it for Stormbringer and for Hawkmoon. And there is a sense of a lack of confidence in the Hawkmoon game, because it's encouraging you almost to play crossover games, isn't it?
Yeah, and when I had a look at it, it does. My initial thought is this would be great to take characters from the Young Kingdoms.
Yeah.
So if you were doing a Stormbringer game and you were doing it regularly as part of the campaign, it would be a really good idea to take those characters and have them kind of transported to the world of Hawkmoon. Something that kind of did happens in the books occasionally. People kind of cross over, and I think it'd be useful for that. As a role-playing game in its own right, as I say, I think it kind of was almost cut off in its prime a little bit.
Yeah. I think it certainly goes some way to creating the evocative setting of Hawkmoon, but it's not quite successful.
Yeah, I think it's not, and it kind of it's a little bit of a shame really, because you can see how the Eternal Champion stuff has a lot of potential. And I say it's not really fulfilled in that game, that it could be a bit more of a thing than it was. It seemed to have died a death a little bit, didn't it, after Hawkmoon? And Stormbringer's kind of rumbled on in various different guises, like you say, there's the Elric game. But sometimes you think, well, Stormbringer's a great game, and Hawkmoon would be a great game as well. It's never quite captured perhaps enough people's imagination out there to make it a game, as big a game as perhaps we think it should be.
Yeah,
we're big fans of it, but and there's people out there who are big fans of it, but there's also people who've never heard of it. It's an odd game, I think. It exists in a kind of, if you've heard of it and you like it, you really like it. But there's lots of people who haven't heard of it.
Yeah. I'd be interested if anybody else actually played in the Hawkmoon universe. To hear from them. I mean, they did go and they did produce Chaosium licensed a third party to produce much later a Quorum supplement.
Yeah,
that's very difficult to get hold of. I'd love to have a look at that. But
I think I've seen that on eBay. It's about £100 on eBay, something silly like that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Hawkmoon. I think we better move to the next one. If you pick up the Curse Cup, let's see what the Lords of Chaos have for us next. 17. Now this is an interesting sideways move here. This is Imagine Adventure Games magazine for the players of Dungeons and Dragons game.
What's that? I've never heard of that.
That's a bit niche, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit.
So Imagine was a monthly magazine published by TSR UK between 1983 and 1985. And I have got a Grognard file based on the magazine. It's up on my shelf. I shall pull it down, and in a future one we'll look at it in more depth at a later date. But what this one is, this is the Moorcock special, which featured an interview, an article about the Eternal Champion, a story, and a scenario for AD&D. And just having a look at it, I mean, it's a bit of a... I don't know how it's got on the table, to be honest, because there's only one mention of Stormbringer.
But what I do like about the edition of Imagine is that, and you think that its competitor at the time was White Dwarf. And White Dwarf was a great magazine, but what I think they do really well in this issue is as a role player, you get a lot of information. You get an interview with Michael Moorcock, you get a story, and you get an article about Moorcock's books and everything, as well as the scenario. And I kind of like that it's something that, and I might be, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think White Dwarf really ever did. White Dwarf always had its particular areas, didn't it? It never devoted an issue to an author or anything like that. And I think that's kind of interesting. And I think what's also interesting about it is that it kind of takes role-playing games and then points people in the direction of a particular writer, and talking to the writer. And I know White Dwarf did that with Critical Mass, which was their kind of book review section. But Imagine kind of pushes that a little bit further. It's kind of saying to role players, you play the games, but there are books out there and stuff out there that you can use and adapt. And there's a guy who wrote some of these books, and this is what he thinks. And that's a kind of an interesting move, I think.
Yeah, definitely. There's an interesting. The interview's good because it is very hard to find references of Moorcock making references to games and the games that have been inspired by his work. But he was actively involved in this issue, and the only mention of Stormbringer is where he cheerfully recounts a story where he'd allowed TSR to use creatures and gods from the Young Kingdoms in deities and demigods, and they had to remove it because he'd forgotten that he'd given Chaosium the license. So.
Yes, that's right. I used to have a copy of Deities and Demigods with the Melniboné stuff in it.
Really?
A very early edition, paperback edition of it, which had those in. Like you say, I've got a later edition where they disappear for that reason, presumably. I didn't know that at the time, but that would be the reason we wanted the license and stuff. Yeah.
So really good issue, and look forward to more Imagine in the future. Okay, let's hit the dice cup again.
Okay.
34. Okay, this is Demon Magic. It's the second Stormbringer companion. Produced in 1985, which is a particularly fecund period for Stormbringer because it was released in the early 80s.
It was 81, wasn't it? I think 81. Yeah.
And it wasn't only till 85 when there was a line of products to support it. So, I think the first major release was the Stormbringer Companion. So the first companion, which was done in 1983 with some extra rules and scenarios, and it was eventually that was bundled with the third edition. So this companion, you've had a look through it. It's got rules for sanity, some scenarios, and some demon characteristics. What do you think of it?
Well, I've got mixed feelings about it. The scenarios, at first glance, seem quite tough. Some of the statistics, you think, how are you supposed to survive through this? I've no idea. But the scenarios are okay, they're fine. The most interesting aspect of it is the sanity rules, I think. On the one hand, I quite like them because I think that the idea that sorcerers can lose sanity by summoning a god or a demon is quite a neat idea. And it's sort of in keeping with the books as well. I know in the previous podcast we talked about one of the problems of Stormbringer is game balance, in that sorcerers are very, very powerful and can become very powerful very quickly. So the idea that they can lose a bit of sanity while summoning these demons makes it a little bit more risky for them, I think is interesting. It's a neat way of balancing the game. So I like that aspect of it. Although, having said that, some of the, again, it does this thing that Stormbringer does, of some of the pluses of sanity, the additions to sanity that it gives Melnibonians and Pantangians, sort of suggest they're impervious to sanity loss, which is a bit of a weird concept, because I think the idea that a a powerful Melnibonian character or Pantangian can lose sanity, gives game balance. But I think Melnibonians get, I think it's power times 5, isn't it? And Melnibonians end up with powers of 20 and 25 anyway, and then they get a plus 20% on sanity. You think, well, he's not going to lose any, is he? Well, that's a bit of an odd thing. But then again, I think sanity might be capped at 90%, so there's always a chance. But I quite like that side of it. What I'm not so keen on is the sanity losses for seeing monsters and that kind of thing, a little bit like Cthulhu, because I think in a fantasy game, you don't want to be bogged down too much. It seems okay to think if you summon Ariok or Arioch, are you ever any pronunciation? I'm back into pronunciation problems.
You say Ariok, I say Arioch.
Let's call the whole thing up. If you summon him, and he's a god of chaos, the idea that you might lose some sanity is kind of a legitimate concept, I think.
Yeah.
The idea that the bunch of adventurers, when they meet a clacker or some kind of monster, lose a D6 sanity, I'm not so keen on, because I think it strays then into Cthulhu territory where you encounter some reasonable monster, kind of moderate monster, and everyone's gibbering in the corner. Well, it's a sword and sorcery game. I mean, you want a kind of a bit of fighting, don't you? A bit of action. Yeah. But I think the bit for sorcerers is quite good. You could see how you could adapt it, because I think the sorcerer bit is quite a neat idea, really.
Yeah, I mean, mechanically, it's a straight lift from Cthulhu, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And it is quite interesting to see the parallel development of Stormbringer and Cthulhu, because they're both licensed games that were released at the same time. And maybe this was an attempt to reach out and connect Stormbringer with Cthulhu.
Yeah, possibly.
Players.
Yeah. There's the bit at the back, isn't there, where they give the demon statistics, so they kind of pin the demons down a little bit more in terms of what they can and can't do, whereas in the original rules, that's not the case, is it?
Again, a very Cthulhu idea of kind of...
Yeah.
These unnameable horrors, we're going to, we can't describe them or what they do, but here's a few pages on what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a bit like that, isn't it? It kind of seems a bit of a waste of time, because it seems like a bit of a retrograde step, doesn't it? Because what you want is that idea that it's open-ended. It's quite an exciting concept,
Yeah.
It's almost like, I mean, I dare to say this now, but it's almost like Stormbringer in its original format is quite an interesting and quietly revolutionary game. I know we said this last time. Yeah. It's kind of got things in it that are quite interesting and different. And then it's almost like supplements that came after that try to kind of rein it in almost and make it more conventional. It's a bit like people have looked at it and a lot of people go, what's this? Oh God, this is a bit crazy. What do you mean? You're a Melnibonian sorcerer. I'm a one-armed beggar. That's not going to work. And what about that? What do these demons do? What do they look like?
Yeah.
All those kind of issues that people might feel are out of the comfort zone. So supplements after that have tried to go, well, don't worry about that. We've got sanity rules which will rein in those sorcerers a little bit and make them a little bit more balanced. And we've got descriptions of the demons, so you don't have to worry about negotiating. There's hard and fast rules about what they can do and what they can't do. And they just feel a bit like that. I mean, I'm not saying that was deliberate, but there's a definite sense of that, I think.
Yeah, I think it's this companion is trying to create parity with Call of Cthulhu, which was popular at the time.
Yeah, which was probably, probably.
It is.
Would have been. Would have been.
Will always be.
Well, always is. Too much of it, isn't it? But it would have been a far, far more popular game. And that's the thing, I think. They're probably looking at Stormbringer and thinking, we make it a bit more like Cthulhu. That might make people kind of latch onto it a little bit more. Yeah.
Let's roll again.
Okay.
57. Okay. I'm glad 57 came up. White Wolf. This is Temples, Demons, and Ships of War.
Okay.
This is a slim volume. It was the last supplement that was produced for the second edition, 1987. It includes plans and details for 3 temples, Escape from Yellow Hell, a scenario, a set of rules for ships, and a set of stats for Elric by Sandy Peterson, no less. So, what do you make of this one? It's very slim, and again, it's part of that supplements that trying to sort out some of the issues of the original rules.
Yeah. I mean, the temples are actually very good. I quite like those. They're kind of interesting, aren't they? They're kind of quite colourful, and there's like a fire. There's the fire god under a volcano kind of one. That's they are quite good. Your Temple of Law, your Temple of Chaos, and I like those. I think they're the best bit of it, really.
Yeah.
The weaker bit, the ship thing. There's some. I say there's rules for ship combat, but they're not rules for ship combat. They're just a bit peculiar. They're like rules that give ships like statistics, like the number of crew and the hull points and the manoeuvrability and all that kind of malarkey. But you might correct me if I'm wrong, unless I'm missing something, that doesn't really describe how you're supposed to use these things. It doesn't,
It is an absence from the rules because the Young Kingdoms, you could argue that Melniboné is a fading empire, is it's a kind of satire, you could say, of Britain.
Yeah,
as a maritime,
yes, a maritime empire that's in decline.
Yeah, it's in decline, and you see that kind of motif repeated throughout the Multiverse and Eternal Champion series. So it's a maritime world, and most adventures at some point you'll be on a ship.
Yes. Yeah.
So what you do need some rules for dealing with those situations on a ship.
Yeah.
But these don't satisfy
No.
that,
I mean, they're useful in the sense that they give an impression of how many crew. So, a Melniboné war galleon has 2,000 slaves and 1,000 troops, and that's kind of useful because it gives you a feel for what the kind of number of people that would be on these things. But in terms of anything else, it doesn't really give you all that much because I don't quite know how the kind of hull points. I mean, the idea that they would take some damage, but again, doesn't really talk about what could damage them.
Well, I wouldn't. I think if you look in the dictionary under half-baked, there's
a picture of the ship.
Yeah, it's got Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood holding
one of those.
Yeah,
soggy bottom.
Yeah. But anyway,
I find. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Though, with the ship rules, because my heart sort of sank a little bit. Maybe excuse the pun. When I saw it, because although they're not ship combat rules, I'm always a bit uncomfortable with the game within a game. And it's a little bit of a digression, but the game within a game.
Yeah,
so the idea, in Traveller, you get the ship combat, starship combat rules, where if the characters get into starship combat, their player characters in a little tin box in space, and it suddenly becomes a tabletop game. I think D&D have done. I think a few games have done it. Like battle rules. So rules for battle. So if the players are in a battle, there's suddenly another game almost on top of the role-playing game. And although these ship rules are not like that, when I first looked at the supplement, I thought, oh, here we go. It's another one of those things. And I don't know. People probably will disagree, but I take a bit of a dim view of it. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of it. I just think if it's a role-playing game, let's stick to the characters. I mean, admittedly, in Travel, it's a little bit different because starships, you're going to get starship combat. But if you are in a fantasy role-playing game and the characters are in the midst of a battle, I'm fine with the games master determining the way that battle's going to go for the purposes of the story, and the players are just enacting their bit of the battle whilst it goes on around them.
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of the idea that, oh, right, everyone, it's a battle now, so we're going to do some tabletop wargaming as well as role-playing. And I suppose it's like the ship rules. I mean, maybe I'm speaking in the defence of these rules now, that the idea of ship combat rules in Stormbringer, probably a bad idea. Maybe it's fine to say, you're on a Melniboné war galleon and someone hits it and it starts to sink. It's fine. It's an adventure, isn't it? So we're not too worried about why the ship's sinking. Something hits it and it sinks. Yeah, that's all right. I don't know. People probably disagree, but I just always find that. My heart always sinks a little bit when I see rules within rules, Yeah.
Let's have a final roll of the dice. 83. This is The Black Sword, Pursuit of the White Wolf. It's another supplement from 1985. It's an adventure, and it's the second part to Stealer of Souls. Both of them written by Ken Rolston, who's actually one of the design team on the new RuneQuest.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it takes place during a story that appears in The Bane of the Black Sword, where Elric is recruited by a group of merchants to kill Nikon by rival merchants. And Elric intended to double-cross them, but he found out that Nikon was in cahoots with Theleb Kana, who's his nemesis, isn't he?
Yes, one of them, yeah.
Pantangian sorcerer. So he killed him. So in Stealer of Sword, I'm having difficulty with that. Do you think Ariok has taken possession of my teeth?
I don't think, I think could be. Got a tooth demon. Become possessed by it.
I'll kill some souls later. Right, in Stealer of Souls, the player characters are employed by Nikon's daughter to avenge her father's death by confronting the rival merchants. So that's out of the way before you start this. And this adventure sets the PCs in pursuit of Elric across land. So I never played this, but I wish I could.
Yeah, I wish I could. I must admit, reading it's a fantastic scenario, isn't it? For a number of reasons. The one thing I really like about it is the fact that it manages to pull off a real trick with role-playing games like Stormbringer that are based on books. It manages to kind of involve you in the stories, the books, without actually involving you in the books, if that makes sense. So you're in the wake of Elric. It picks up an incident that's happened in the books that involves Elric, and you're involved in that. So the characters are from the books, and you're pursuing Elric and following him. So you follow him through bits of the Young Kingdoms and you're in the kind of wake of the stories. So he's been here and this happened, and you then appear. He's gone, but you're the kind of consequences of what he's done and whatever are all there waiting for you. So you're involved in the books, but you're not involved in the books in that way that you feel you're stepping on important toes, which is always the problem with role-playing games like this. You don't want to say, well, we're going to rewrite the books. You're not doing that. You're just in following his footsteps, and you go to the same places, and you see the same things, and you see the kind of consequences of what he's done. And I think that's a really clever. It doesn't sound that clever, but actually it is very clever. It is very clever.
And the way that it's done as well is brilliantly evocative. It's probably because of the time it was done. Because you think this was people moving from doing dungeon crawls.
Yes. Yeah.
To a more story-based approach, more narrative-based approach. Because if you think, even if there's several city adventures in this, isn't there? So
there are,
from city to city. I mean, even back in the day, back in the early days, cities would just be dungeons with the lids taken off.
Yeah.
That's not the case here, is it?
No.
This is, you go and it's got the details there for you to experience the city.
Yeah. And kind of encounter people and negotiate and talk to people. I mean, there is a lot of action in it. It's kind of action-packed. There is fighting,
definitely,
combat, but
that's what's so good about it. I think it blends.
Yeah, it does.
The story. It's done, but it is full of incident and action, and it's never a dull moment in it, is it?
And even at the end, when you confront Elric, I feel actually spoilers this, isn't it? But is anyone going to play it? I don't know. Even when you confront Elric at the end, it's not a straightforward fight.
No,
there's a kind of negotiation there, isn't there? You kind of meet Moonglum and his wife, is it Zarazenia?
Yeah,
you meet her, and there is like a negotiation there in how you exact revenge on part of the merchant's daughter, and how you do it and what kind of negotiation you come up with. And that's kind of fascinating as well, because again, thinking back to that time in the mid-80s, you tended to get scenarios where you went after somebody, you were employed to take out revenge on someone, you went after them, they were an evil wizard or whatever, and you ended up killing them, and that was the end of it. Whereas the confrontation with Elric slightly different. It's a slightly more mature. I think it's more of a mature kind of approach to how this merchant's daughter gets her revenge, you know, and that's interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it was Albert Schweitzer who said that all he wanted, when you asked what do you want more than anything else, he said a vase full of time. A vase full of time.
I thought you were going to say a good Stormbringer scenario then. I didn't know he was a player.
He said a vase full of time. And I'm sure that he wanted it to, you know, the perfectibility of the human civilization. I just want a vase of time so I could play more role-playing games.
Yeah, me too, yeah. That paints us in a bad light, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What would you do with a vase full of time or role-playing?
I wish I'd found this.
Yeah, I do. It kind of passes by a little bit. But again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I think that's the weird thing about Stormbringer. It was a great game, but some of the stuff, because it wasn't licensed over here, or wasn't necessarily published over here, or wasn't distributed well, for whatever reason, it was all a bit like the Elric stories, oddly, ironically. You know, the way that the Elric stories appeared in magazines and all over the place.
Fragmented.
Yeah, it was a bit fragmented. You found stuff and it didn't seem to get quite the publicity that it should have done, and passed you by a little bit, you know, because we were, you know, I had Stormbringer, we would play Stormbringer, but some of this stuff passed us by a bit, which is odd, because at the time we were heavily into role-playing games.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it just did somehow.
I'm going to have a rummage in my bag. Whilst I'm having a rummage in my bag, because one of the things that you should look out for is a podcast called System Mastery. Have you listened to it?
No, I've not. Not yet. I will do now though.
They've done a Stormbringer episode, and if you want an antidote to our gushing enthusiasm.
Oh right, they're not like it.
They don't like it.
Oh right.
They look at the 4th edition rules.
I won't listen to it now.
Yeah, well, you should listen to it, because...
Are you suggesting that I should get a rounded opinion and accept all different opinions?
Yeah, other opinions are available.
Not going to do that. I'm a rules lawyer. You know me better than that.
Just a moment, I'm just going to crinkle. So if you're walking the dog and you're wondering what that noise is in your ear, it's me going in my bag. But yeah, I mean, to use an American expression, they tear it a new bottom. That's what they do.
Do they?
Yeah. They really...
Seems a bit harsh.
Well,
what's the gripe?
Well, one of the gripes, and this is what I want to come to, because we've got two supplements here that provide the statistics to Elric.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So in the White Wolf, Sandy Peterson has a go, and you've got Ken Rolson. One of their gripes is that, you know, if you're a fan of the books, surely you want to play Elric.
No.
You know?
That's our first point of disagreement. No, well, would you? Do you?
Well, I
don't want to play H.P. Lovecraft in Cthulhu. That's not quite the same thing, is it?
No, it's not the same.
No, true.
Your thesis.
I don't want to play a puny, bespectacled man. I'm already one of those. The whole point of role playing is to not be a puny, bespectacled man.
What I think Ken St Andrew said it'd be hubristic to play.
Yeah.
But what you can do, and I think what the beauty is if you are a fan of the books, and this is not necessary, but you can encounter.
Yeah. You know, Black Sword does that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's what's so wonderful about it. So these are the stats for Sandy Peterson's Elric, and I've got Ken.
Okay.
Ken's Elric.
Oh dear, that's. I think this is a better one.
Yeah.
No, I think so. Stormbringer is better.
Well, there's only one way to resolve this.
2d8 damage plus 3d6 plus 1d6. Why not say 4d6? Anyway, plus 1d100 power drain when it hits you. Blimey.
Right, well, this one, so Stormbringer here, he does 2d8 plus 4d6.
Yeah, the same, but does it not mention a power drain? Because that's the whole point, isn't it?
No, there's no power drain.
Well, it's not Stormbringer, is it? I think it's been sold a dodgy sword. Someone said, this is Stormbringer, Elric. Is it? Good, yeah, right.
I think with this one, if you confront Elric in Ken's version, Ken Rolson's version, you're not allowed to use Stormbringer anyway.
It's part of the negotiation.
Yeah.
He's agreed, hasn't he, to not use it. with
So
his
no
wife.
demon armor.
His wife, Zarazenia, has forbidden him to use it. He's a fun prevention officer. Elric's got a fun prevention officer. Can I use the life draining sword? No, he can't. Keep it in the cupboard. I've told you once.
So no demon armor, no demon sword. No demon sword. So you have two naked albinos wrestling with each
It's like
other.
women in love. Two naked Elrics wrestling. I don't know.
I don't think.
I don't know how that's going to be reacted
I
to
don't
by
think
the
we're going
public.
to resolve that here.
No, I'd rather not, to be honest.
I think it's time to leave.
But I think just as a final point, it's interesting that though, isn't it? How they don't like the fact that you can play, you don't play Elric, because I've looked at. I think it's a Doctor Who role playing game, isn't it? I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and I've looked at the Doctor Who role playing game. One of the things I don't like about it is the fact that you play the Doctor and his assistant. And I find, you see, I'm of the opposite view. I find that an uncomfortable concept.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of role playing in the Doctor Who universe as a Time Lord would maybe fine, but and I may be wrong here, but flicking through the rules, I think I looked at it at Dragon Meet actually. There's the thing where you play the Doctor, and I thought that's a bit odd.
Was that the thing with Indiana Jones?
Yeah, Indiana Jones did the same thing. I'm not sure if there's a James Bond role playing game that does that as well. I might be wrong, but yeah, the Indiana Jones, that was it. And I have the opposite view. I think that is a bit bothersome and a bit of a problem. I like the idea that you adventure in that world. So Indiana Jones, you adventure in the world of Indiana Jones, but you're not playing Indiana Jones. Yeah. So it's like this: you're adventuring in the world of Elric, but you're not Elric. It, for me, is the way to go. It's just interesting that their view is the opposite. You know, the whole point is you play Elric. You play Elric and Moonglum and Rakir the Red Archer.
I mean, obviously, I'm representing their argument. But what they're saying is that all the way through the rulebook, and this isn't true of the early rulebooks. It's kind of saying, you know, you'll never be as good as Elric. You know, it's kind of kicking it in your face.
Well, yeah, that's probably a fair point, I suppose. If he's been held up as, you know, but I don't know. It's an odd one. It's one for further debate, I think, at some point. Yeah, but it'd be interesting to know what people think about that. I think. Yeah,
I mean, we're definitely going to have to come back to this because the dice have not brought out any Elric exclamation mark supplements.
No,
and some of the later stuff. So we're definitely going to have to come back. We always say that, don't we?
We do.
I've got an appointment down at the bottom of the garden to see Ed in his shed to see how much it cost for you to get these supplements. So till next time, see you, Blythy.
Okay, goodbye.
Ed's bargain shed.
Okay, I'm just heading out of the towers through the rain-sodden garden to the shed where Eddy lives. Now there's a tangled woman over there. I'll ignore that and knock on.
Come in.
Hello, Eddy.
Hello there, Dirk.
Right, so this time we're talking about Stormbringer, and I know that you've collected a lot of Stormbringer over the last couple of years.
Well, not really. I only have a few things, but it's all happened ad hoc. Just I picked up the first Stormbringer module, which was the 3rd edition rules about 2 years ago now, and I got that purely out of the novelty and nostalgia reasons. It was something that I had back in the day that went over the wall, so I thought I must get that again. Yeah. So I picked it up. And
I can't remember you Games Mastering it though back in the day.
I never did. I think Blythy did most of the Games Mastering for that. I think, having to think about it, Stormbringer was the only game that I never actually played before I met you and Blythy. Right. Me and Herbert, we did the usual Tunnels and Trolls, Dungeons and Dragons, RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, in that order. And then we bumped into you two. And then we kind of never played Stormbringer that time. I don't know why. It was out. It was out a few years before then, but it must have passed us by.
So if I wanted to get hold of the 1st or 2nd edition rules, how much would they cost?
Well, the 1st and 2nd are almost identical apart from the rule book. In the 1st edition, they're in three or four little booklets. The 2nd edition's all joined together in one booklet. And it doesn't come up that often, actually, but you can expect to pay the box set, I'd say anything from £20 to £30, maybe more. If you were, if you're really after it, it was in mint condition. I picked up the first edition, and I paid £30 for it, but which seemed a lot when I looked at it. It was a buy it now with delivery that were free, and it seemed a lot. And it was only by chance that I clicked on it, and it had 3 other modules thrown in. It had the companion, it had the Black Sword, it had the Stealer of Souls campaign in the box set, all for £30. So when I worked it out, that's like 4 items, all for £30. So each one of them come to about £7.50 each.
Yeah.
So
Good.
I thought that was a bargain. So
What?
snapped it up.
When I casual browsing myself, it seems that the 3rd edition is the one that you can get hold of quite easily.
It is. That's what I picked up a few years ago as well. It was dirt cheap on Amazon. You could get it below £10. I think I paid about £7 or £8 for it at the time. But lately, it's gone. People must have picked them up, and the transfer of these books have slowed down a bit because they've risen. I think you're going to be expected to pay about over £10 to £20, I think, for that book now.
But the 4th edition seems the one that's most prevalent, the one that's most available. So that's a 90s one, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right, 1991, I think that came out. And it's probably the best one to get. If you ask me which one to get, it just seems the same as all the early editions. I think it's been tidied up, but the layout's got that Chaosium look. It looks, in my eyes, good.
Yeah.
The artwork on the front's great. So it's got everything that all the early editions had, and I think, without going into details about the rules changes, I think it's been tidied up a little bit, yet it still keeps that kind of chaotic character generation bit at the beginning, which I think's very important for Stormbringer.
And how much is that one?
The 4th one, I think I got mine from, I think that was Amazon. Yeah, again, anything from £10 to £20, but I think you might pay a little bit more than that now.
Right.
I think as a rule of thumb, I have an Ed's Bargainometer.
Right.
So anything below £10, whatever it is, for these old modules, anything below a tenner, you're going to get a bargain. So that's a bargain, no matter what it is. And the next step up is from £10 to £20. Now that's a reasonable price to pay for whatever book you're going to get.
Yeah.
And then above that, 20 to 30, you're in the realms of, do I really want it? Do I really need it? Am I collecting it? Anything above £30 is in the collecting zone. And if you really want it, you pay it. It doesn't matter. If you want it, get it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it's them 3 bands up to £30, I think you could get most modules for. Some always go for more, some go for less.
It's a strange thing that the 5th edition seems to be the one that gets the highest price.
That's always seems to be about £50, £60 for some reason.
That's off the scale on the Bargainometer.
It is. I don't know why. I've seen it, and I know I could get hold of one now. I'll not mention it on air for $37.99 free delivery. Now, that's not what I would pay.
Right.
But I know if you're interested, and I know you like your Stormbringer stuff. But if you really wanted it, I'll let you know.
Thanks for it. Okay, let's have a look at some of these supplements then. So we know that Hawkmoon was part of the Dragon Meat haul. But if you weren't lucky or such a bargaining master like yourself, how much would you expect to pay?
I think for box sets, like any of the Chaosium box sets, you take your Ed's Bargainometer and you add £10 to it.
Right.
So anything that's, if you're getting under £20 for a box set, is a bargain. Now, I have seen someone's picked one up quite recently, a box set, looked in good nick for under £20, just under £20. Now, that was a bargain. We paid £10 without the box, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, very good.
So everything kind of, the old box sets, I'd say you're going to pay £20 plus.
Okay. And I know you don't collect magazines very much, but what about Imagine magazine, the Moorcock special?
Yeah, you showed me that earlier, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's got a fantastic cover on it. Now, I've never bought an Imagine magazine. I remember them being on the shelves of W.H. Smith's, and I flicked through them, but because they were mostly D&D, and we never played that in the mid-80s, 85, 86. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you look at, I think, a £5 for a magazine, if you're going to pay under £5, it's a bargain.
Yeah.
If you really want it. I mean, I know you're big on Michael Moorcock. It's fantastic. It's a good nick, that one. So, how much did you pay for it?
I think I paid $3.99.
Yeah, that's a bargain.
And I know that in some of the shops it's a lot more. They're asking like 15, 20 quid
Yeah,
for
so
it.
that's too much. I think on eBay, you can pay for magazines under a £5. You got a bargain. £5 to £10 is if you want it, and it's the one missing out of your collection. Anything over £10, you're paying through the nose. It's like that one missing magazine that you need for your collection that I would pay over a tenner.
Yeah, I know you were pleased to find Demon Magic when you got it at Dragon Meat.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I paid £10 for that, so I was really chuffed because that goes for silly prices. That I've seen for £30. People have bought that and bidded for it. So that's a little bit much, I think. But £10 to £20, I would have paid for that. And it's got a load of scenarios in. It's got some rules change as well, but it's also got the Velvet Circle, which is supposed to be a really, really good campaign. Now, I've never read that, but it's written by the Masks of Nyarlathotep author Larry DiTilio. So I've not read it because I'm hoping someone would run it for us. So
they might get a chance. You might
get
a chance.
So I think that's a bargain. But I'd expect normally to pay £20 for something like that.
And what about this one, White Wolf?
I knew that. I put you in touch with that. I'd never seen that until I stumbled across it on eBay. And I think it was only £10.
Yeah, it was only 10 of that one.
I thought
a bargain on the Bargainometer.
That's right. It just tipped in at the bargain side. So now, because I hadn't seen it, I weren't sure whether it was any good. Although looking at it now, it's got some fantastic diagrams. Typical Chaosium, isn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. But it's got, what would put me off is these ship rules. Why do they have ship rules in them? I mean, what's the big hoo-ha about ships? Have you ever wanted to play a ship?
Well, it just so happens that my next campaign you'll be playing
a ship.
Yeah, a frigate. Yeah.
It doesn't exactly float my boats.
Very good. And finally, the Black Sword, Pursuit of the White Wolf, that you got bundled, didn't you, with your rule book?
That's right. I mean, this is the main reason why I bought the box set, which cost me £30 for all 4 parts of it.
It's a fantastic adventure, that one.
Is it? I've not looked at it in any depth. I've flicked through it. And I'm a sucker for campaigns, so if there's a campaign out there, I tend to want it, especially when it's done by Chaosium, because I love the maps. The covers are great. I just like the format. They're easy to read.
I think as well, it kind of falls into your thing that you always say that the really good supplements are the ones that have good scenarios in, because there's too many of them that kind of bung more rules in and more stuff.
Yeah.
But the good stuff is the scenarios, and that's the thing with all the Stormbringer companions and things. They give you extra adventures to play.
They do, virtually every rule book. Well, I'm not sure about the 5th edition, but I'm sure it does have. But every one has 4 or 5 scenarios in to get you going. Some of you even have solo scenarios. So you get a lot of bang for your buck, really, with the Chaosium stuff. I think so, anyway.
Yeah. So how much for the Black Sword?
It came as part of my box set deal, so I paid £7.50.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I point out to people is that they often get wrongly categorised, don't they?
They do.
Yeah,
you've got to be very, very clever with your searches. You can, if you put in just looking like the war game section of eBay, you type it in and you see the same old stuff that are buy it nows that have been there for years. But you sometimes got to be a bit clever with your searches, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've got to kind of look under a different category, look under general category, look under books, and sometimes you find them. That goes for a lot of things that you're searching for on eBay, or anywhere, not just on the net. Don't just go straight onto eBay and buy it. Try Amazon. Search under different categories under Amazon. Just do a Google search for the books. Sometimes you find it. Abe books. I've used them a lot.
Yeah.
Got some things off them that are dirt cheap.
Before I leave the shed, I'm going to ask you one last question. When are you going to run Rogue Mistress for us?
Well, I did say I would. I think when we had a drink about a year ago, I was kind of extolling the kind of this brilliant campaign that I'd just read called Rogue Mistress. Now this is it's dirt cheap, really. It's only about £10, £12 on eBay. It's got a fantastic campaign in there, going to different dimensions. You know, it's like an alien spaceship, which is this head or these island
don't
realms.
spoil it for me.
Island realms that are held by chains and being pulled towards chaos, or the future Earth that you just. It's a fantastic campaign actually, which could, with a clever GM, convert it to another system, to like Cthulhu or any other system. It's brilliant.
And you've just been showing me Magic World earlier, so
Yeah. Magic World is the kind of Stormbringer rules with the young kingdoms taken off. So it's all the Elric connections and all the young kingdoms parts just taken off, and just with the boiled down rules. So if anybody's looking to get hold of just the rules, have a look at Magic World. Get hold of that.
And that's available on the KCM website, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah. You can get the PDF of that now still. And I think I got it from Amazon. Again, £15 or something like that. Mm. If you're struggling for the rules, and you can easily run Magic World and just get yourself a Stormbringer supplement and run it with that. Right. You don't really need all the background that comes with the Stormbringer rule sets. I don't think so, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to the Rogue Mistress.
In about 5 years' time.
Yeah. Till next time. See you later.
See you later.
Show and tell.
Welcome back, Blythy.
Hello, Dirk.
So this is a new section. It's so new that I've come up with a rubbish working title that seems to have stuck. And it's called Show and Tell. And we've come to the very summit of Dirt Towers, into the attic, where we retreat to find remnants of our past and possible futures. Okay, the only thing that lives here are pigeons and spiders, and there's piles and piles of boxes filled with stuff that doesn't fit under the stairs. Did you have any trouble coming through the hatch?
A little bit, but I'm in now.
You managed to squeeze through. Yeah, we need a bigger hatch. Okay, how will this work? Well, we're going to take turns in sharing something significant and interesting from our collections, okay? We have loads of stuff relating to Moorcock. I mean, myself, when I left for college back in '88, I became an obsessive collector of Moorcock material. Everywhere I went, every charity shop, every second-hand shop, I would go on the hunt for something. And I remember the day I found the film tie-in novelisation of The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. It was a momentous day. Found it in York, I think it was. A dog-eared copy, full of mildew, but I still had it. It was still mine, so that was great. So he's a very accessible author in terms of media. He divides his time between Austin, Texas, and Paris. He comes visiting, but he's a very accessible author. And when he has a new book, he often tours with it. But we've only ever met him once.
We have, yeah. Oh, we say met. Watched him from a distance.
Watched him from a distance?
Didn't really meet him, did we?
I got a book signed by him at that time.
Yeah, true.
That counts as encountering someone, doesn't it?
I think it's on the encounter table, the celebrity encounter table. I think it does, yes.
Yeah. And we went to see him at Odyssey 7. So Odyssey 7 was in Manchester. Manchester is the nearest metropolis to us, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
The world's first industrial city. And the site of Odyssey 7.
Odyssey 7, which was a science fiction bookshop. It sold a little bit of role-playing stuff, didn't it? And it actually sold some rather unusual role-playing things that weren't available. I think we saw the KC Ringworld role-playing game.
We did,
there.
Yeah. And it had a lot of Fantasy Games Unlimited stuff.
Yeah. So, but it was predominantly a bookshop.
Yeah.
Science fiction and fantasy bookshop.
And it also had an amazing collection of imported material. So stuff from America with yellow edges to the spine.
Yes.
Yellow edges to the books, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we used to go there. I used to have posters as well. And it used to be advertised in the back of Starburst magazine. So we made the trek over there. We had to walk over there. And it's in the University Park, and it's part of a shopping mall. Yeah. That never had anybody in it.
No, it wasn't. It was a desolate shopping mall, which was like, it's a shopping mall. It wasn't. We didn't call it a shopping mall then, did we?
No,
it's a shopping centre. It was an Arndale centre. It was a shopping mall. It is now a shopping mall because we've all watched, Dawn of the Dead. But it actually felt like something from Dawn of the Dead.
It did,
It was like desolate and
it had music playing really loudly, didn't it?
Yeah.
And the escalators would just like send you up there into this ghostly place. And Odyssey 7 was a corridor-like shop with books stacked on either side and posters and things like that. And Michael Moorcock was going to be there, so we made it be like... Because in our heads, Michael Moorcock was some kind of foppish guy with a snap brim fedora.
Yeah, we expected him to look like a wizard.
Yeah.
I think we expected him to turn up wearing a pointy hat and a caftan or some other such strange kind of clothing and be a complete eccentric. And he turned up. And I think what did you whisper to me? Your observation?
He looks like a greengrocer.
He looked like a greengrocer.
He did look like a greengrocer. He had like patches on his...
He was very ordinary looking, wasn't he? He was very ordinary, and it was, I wouldn't say disappointing, but it was slightly surprising, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He looked like a greengrocer.
He looked like somebody who'd be weighing out bananas rather than conjuring up fantasy worlds.
Yeah, yeah. Not that, to be fair, not that the two things are mutually exclusive. I think you can be a greengrocer and a fantasy writer.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are any out there, but you can be.
He clearly is.
Well, I like to think he is.
So, what have you got, first of all, in your sack of surprises?
Well, my first thing is the Michael Moorcock Guide to Greengrocery. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's Michael Moorcock's study of epic fantasy, wizardry and wild romance.
Ah, yes.
Which was a book that we encountered sort of later on in the 80s. And it's, as the title suggests, it's his study of fantasy writing, and it's a series of essays, really, isn't it? But there's one essay in particular that really struck a chord with me, and I know it did with you, and as with quite a few people that we've spoken to over the years, which was the essay entitled Epic Pooh. Pooh as in Pooh Bear, B-O-O-H. And essentially, it's a critique of kind of Tolkien-esque fantasy, and Tolkien, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it has a bit of a, quite a lot of a go at Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, and it gives it a kind of Marxist analysis. That might be a little too harsh, but certainly a left-wing analysis. One of the things Moorcock does is he points out certain features of Lord of the Rings where, the orcs all talk in the vernacular, the elves, anyone who's a good guy, with the exception of Sam Gamgee, has a nice, received pronunciation accent, and anyone who's a villain tends to have a kind of, regional Cockney type of accent. There's things like men from the East, fear of revolution, the status quo, the elves have got sort of power and want to keep it, and all the orcs want is what the elves have got. What's so bad about that? Industrialisation, fear of that kind of thing, the kind of rural idyll that the elves and the hobbits live in, and the kind of grimy industrial, of industrial world of the orcs that's coming to take over. And Moorcock kind of makes the case that Tolkien, sort of establishment figure, bit posh, Oxbridge, essentially Lord of the Rings is a fear of revolution, it's a fear of the working classes, it's a fear of that kind of thing. Now, that kind of struck a chord with us. Whether you agree with that or not, it is debatable. It's a controversial view. Yeah. But I think the other thing that Wizardry and Wild Romance did, and this is really the more significant thing for me and you, I think, and for some of our friends, it was sort of saying it's all right to not like Tolkien that much. Yeah. Because secretly, I don't. Yeah. I find him a bit boring. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm not questioning his literary abilities, and those films they made were fantastically exciting, but we always had a problem that we would read lots of fantasy fiction. We like Moorcock, and we like Fritz Leiber, and we like Robert E. Howard, and we like people like that. But I always struggled with Tolkien. I always found it a bit dull. I mean, when Sam and Frodo get onto those misty marshes, is it? Yeah. Or whatever. Oh my God, it's boring. It is. I've said it now. It's out there. It's boring. I found it boring. And I think Wizardry and Wild Romance was quite a liberating read because it really, putting aside the kind of left-wing Marxist analysis, even if you agree or not agree, they don't agree with that. It sets up the idea. Do you know what? It's actually all right to not like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
You can be a fantasy fan. You can like fantasy writing. You can like all sorts of different things. You can like role playing and all that. You don't have to like Tolkien particularly, and I don't. I find him a bit dull.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm pleased you chose, because this is a very very important book in my formative period.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Because I think it's. I mean, reading it again. Right, I've been reading it again recently. It's not as angry as I remember it. It's more of a patchwork quilt of quotes of stuff out there that is an exemplar of the stuff that he thinks fantasy should be.
Yeah.
And I think it's not so much I think it's not so much a Marxist analysis, in that he's trying to say that somehow fantasy and speculative fiction should respond to the world around them.
Yeah.
What it shouldn't be doing is serving up platitudes and heaven forbid, nostalgia. I mean, people who peddle nostalgia,
they're the worst kind of people.
They're the worst kind of
people.
They're
the worst kind of people. We would never like to think of ourselves as doing that.
No. So he's coming from his anarchist view that he formed in the 60s of being in this era when the old order, the establishment, was trying to hold on to colonial power that was slowly disintegrating, and seeing the rise of seeing the rise of the proletariat wanting more and having aspiration. And what he's saying is that it's like harking back to what they wanted before. But as you say, more importantly, doing it in a really boring way.
Yeah.
So what he presents is a load of authors who have written speculative fiction that engages with what's happening in the world and presents it in a really challenging and interesting way. And thanks to this, I discovered Inviconium, which is John Harrison's collection, brilliant novels. Also, Mythago Wood. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember that.
Stock. Really, really good novels that kind of challenge and offer a different perspective on fantasy.
Yeah. I think you're right, and that's the key to it. Like you say, whether you agree or not with his analysis of Lord of the Rings, that can be put aside. But it does push you in the direction of saying there's other stuff out there, and you don't necessarily have to like this. You don't have to put this on a pedestal, because there is that sense with Tolkien. There's a sense with Lord of the Rings that it's there on a pedestal, and to be revered and to be at the centre of all fantasy fiction, and all fantasy kind of comes off that, shoots off that. And whilst it is obviously an influential book, and I suppose you have to ask the question, without Lord of the Rings, what would have happened to fantasy writing? Would it have gone in the direction it did? I mean, there is that. Yeah. But it's not the be-all and end-all. No. We were both, I think, in our early teenage years, slightly embarrassed and ashamed. It was like a dark secret, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think even we discussed it between us. I think even with each other, we kept it a bit of a secret until we were a bit older. And then I think, I can't remember, but it might have been, I have a memory of it being in Games Workshop, actually. Yeah. And I think we were looking at Middle-earth role-playing or something. I think one of us confessed to the other and said, I don't really like Tolkien.
Yeah.
I think one of them, was like, neither do I, actually. He's quite boring, isn't he? I really struggled to finish Lord of the Rings. Yeah. And it was like, thank God.
Anybody who has any difficulty with it, I always say 2 words: Tom Bombadil.
Tom Bombadil. Dreadful man. Yeah. Never met him, but I believe he's dreadful.
I just, one thing to say, I think that Moorcock doesn't necessarily follow this pattern, though. Because you got to say that his fantasy fiction is he doesn't really he has the kind of banality of just like inverting things.
Yes, of course he does. Yeah.
And I think that's what I find interesting, is that it's the other authors that he recommends that Peake and the other people who have influenced him.
Yeah.
If you want to have a better understanding of Moorcock's fiction, I do recommend Colin Greenland's book, Death is No Obstacle.
Yeah.
Which was brought out in 92, I think. And Colin Greenland has an Imagine link because he was the book reviewer for Imagine. So that's a bit of a callback to the earlier bit. And what's interesting from a game point of view here as well, he actually gives his formula for how he made those novels back in the day, so when he was writing them. And he took the view that he'd take 60,000 words, divide them into 4 sections, and then of 15,000, you divide them into 6 chapters, and then every chapter needs an incident or action that moves the narrative forward. So that every 4 pages, something jaw-dropping is happening. Yeah. Now, to me, that is a good model for
Are you listening, Tolkien?
Yeah.
Every 4 pages, something happens. Not every 4,000 pages. People have switched off now, haven't they? They don't like Tolkien. Never listen to these people again. Yeah. Heretics.
Well, let's move away from Tolkien onto safer ground, I think.
Well,
music. Because people are not tribal about music.
People are not tribal, and there are no controversial views in music at all.
No.
Correct.
So what I brought here is my vinyl copy of Hawkwind, the Chronicle of the Black Sword, which is from 1985, and it is their interpretation of Moorcock's work, and Moorcock provided lyrics for one of the songs on there, Sleep of a Thousand Tears. And he had a long association with Hawkwind, touring with them occasionally, and if you look on YouTube, you can actually see him reciting poetry alongside the Dead God's Homecoming. I have it on good authority that Hawkwind toured with this as well, with a great show with dancers and things like that, and they were supported by Dumpy's Rusty Nuts.
Really?
Dumpy's Rusty Nuts, which I always think sounds like an AD&D spell. You know, like...
some kind of curse.
Yeah, well, like Tensor's Floating Disc, Dumpy's Rusty Nuts.
Well, it'd be more like a curse, though, wouldn't it? You cast it on someone, they've got rusty nuts.
Now, I gave you this to listen to the other day. Is this the first time you listened to it?
I think I may have listened to it a long time ago. It's a long time since I've listened to it. So it was all kind of came back. Little bits of it came back, but a lot of it felt quite fresh.
Yeah, and what did you think?
I enjoyed it, actually. I enjoyed it a lot. A few weeks ago, I was forced to watch. I say forced. I just couldn't bother getting out of the armchair. I was forced to watch the Brits.
Yeah.
And I have to say, what's happened to music? Why is there no Hawkwind winning a Brit? No equivalent of Hawkwind winning a Brit. It was all boring boy bands, girl bands, and some woman in frock warbling, talking about how miserable she was and her latest relationship broken up. Why is there no one singing about a needle gun? Or Elric the Enchanter, or the Sea Gods of Pantang. Why is no one singing about that? What's gone wrong?
So what you're saying is Adele is like Tom Bombadil.
What I'm saying is, Adele, if you're listening, I want you to. I mean, the Black Sword, Stormbringer has been Moorcock been done. What she needs to record is, I don't know, a musical version of Hawkmoon or Coram maybe, or even Jerry Cornelius. If Adele's next album is a musical adaptation of the Jerry Cornelius stories, I'd buy that. I'd buy that, and I'd say your Brit Award is deserved.
The sound of this is, you can get it on Spotify and listen to it. The sound of this is very much of that mid-80s new prog electronica. And we used to listen to that stuff alongside playing RPGs.
We did, and so, it's a good soundtrack to an RPG session, isn't it? And I do think there's a whole podcast to be done on music that people listen to when they're playing role-playing games. In fact, that's the thing for Twitter. I think we've had 4 games, 4 books. What about 4 pieces of music? 4 RPG pieces of music. There you go, Twitter. Get onto that one.
And we could create a Spotify playlist. Yeah, I'll do that in the
because we would often do that. There were always albums. I mean, what were they? The Robin of Sherwood theme tune. Yeah. Not theme tune, but the soundtrack was one that we always played. Yeah. And you always wanted certain tracks to coincide with the action.
Yeah.
They never did.
And Mike Oldfield's Incantation.
Yeah, that was another one.
Yeah, that was it. But Hawkwind, I think this album used to belong to Eddy, and I think I swapped it for something ridiculous. But I saved it from going over the wall, I think, because Eddy got rid of all his stuff. Yeah. But it's a really good album, and Moorcock was a wannabe rock star.
He was, yeah.
Okay, what have you got up next?
Well, the next thing, and I think this will work really well on a non-visual medium such as podcast, is the posters by Rodney Matthews, the Elric posters, of which there are many. Rodney Matthews, not sounds like a footballer, maybe a footballer, but he's not a footballer. In the same way that Michael Moorcock's not a greengrocer, Rodney Matthews is not a footballer. And his posters and pictures of Elric, I think it's fair to say, have a kind of degree of fame, don't they? I mean, they are kind of quite...
They're distinctive.
They're quite distinctive, aren't they? I mean, he has this style where they look almost insect-like, don't they? There's a kind of insect-like quality to the people. They look kind of, in that way. And it's a kind of odd... It's an odd style, because at the risk of sounding too pretentious, they have that kind of insect-like thing, and it's almost like you're looking in a little world of fantasy, where these kind of little strange little people are knocking around with swords. That's the feeling that you get from Rodney Matthews posters. And I used to have several on my wall as a teenager. I think I was one of Elric and Moonglum fighting a dragon, which I think was on the front cover of Imagine magazine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there's several others of them fighting some kind of beetle people, that kind of thing, beetle monsters. So yeah, I used to really like Rodney Matthews.
Well, I think Elric has always been a visual muse, hasn't he, for graphic artists, and there's a number of graphic novels, and I do believe that when Moorcock was originally conceiving Elric, he worked alongside Jim Cawthorne, who helped to visualise what he might look like, and it wasn't until much later that Jim Cawthorne's material was published in graphic novel form. But there are a number of... I brought some graphic novels here to show you. This is the... again, this is good for...
This works well on radio.
It works really well.
That's a fantastic... That's the most amazing thing I've ever seen, Dirk. It's a pity people can't see it, isn't it?
I'll share these. But P. Craig Russell did a comic strip, artist for a comic strip, and his version of Elric is a lot like August Beardsley's Art Nouveau kind of swirls and really made it an exotic figure. They're a good collection. But a number of people have contacted me to say, I've never read Elric, I've never experienced Moorcock's books. Where's a good starting point? And I've pointed them towards this that came out a couple of years ago. It's the Ruby Throne by Blondell, Polly, Rec and Bastide. And it is a brilliant graphic novel. Good. Not only because of the visual imagery is very striking, but because the writing is very good. They've actually changed the story in places to make it more narratively coherent for a visual medium. But you just have to look at the pictures of Dr. Jest, the torturer, and he kind of picks the cruelty, the casual cruelty of Malnabonian and the darkness. And Ariok is very, very disturbing.
It's that thing with Moorcock, isn't it? There's a multimedia dimension to it, isn't there? There's the music, there's the graphic stuff, more so than a lot of other fantasy authors, really.
There's one absence in Moorcock and Elric, which we'll perhaps come on to when I show my final thing.
Ha
ha!
You're the final thing.
The final thing is the final programme, which is a film that was directed and written by Robert Fust, who's famous for doing the Dr. Phibes film. And this is an adaptation of Moorcock's Jerry Cornelius novel of the same name. Probably his most accessible novel. He wrote 4, and there's lots of short stories. You liked Hall Moon. I was always a big Jerry Cornelius fan. Jerry Cornelius is a spy, bon vivant, rock star, libidinous, bisexual, polymorphly perverse character from the 60s, early 70s. And this film kind of tries to capture some of that experience. It's a bonkers film. But what's interesting about it is I could never get hold of it. I knew, I read Jerry Cornelius in the 80s. I used to score the TV listings every week on the hunt for it, appearing late on Channel 4. It never appeared. And it finally came on DVD in 2013, and I was able to get it. So what's interesting is that there's never been an Elric film.
No, there hasn't. No.
And you would think of all of Moorcock's creation, Elric would have been a great...
It would. It's a strange thing, though, isn't it? It's like I always say with movies. It's that odd thing where, can a movie being a terrible, terrible thing, how it affects things. I mean, the Lord of the Rings films are fantastic. I mean, as we've just discussed, better than the books, in my humble opinion. But I suppose you always worry, don't you, that when somebody makes a movie of something like Elric, would it destroy some of the mystique? Would it? I don't know. I can imagine. I suppose what I'm saying is I can imagine a movie being brilliant, but I can also imagine it being rubbish and being disappointing. It's almost like maybe it's a good thing that it's never been made. It's never been made. It's never been ruined. And there's an element of that,
But you'd think because of its episodic nature and the fact that it has inspired such great graphic novels.
You would think so, yeah. You'd think they'd be queuing up to make a film.
Or a TV series, in the age of Game of Thrones. I mean, they've just started doing the Shannara series. That's dreadful. But you would think that Elric, for an adult fantasy series, you would make it great.
Yeah. And it's like all the Marvel stuff, isn't it? I mean, they're making a Marvel superhero film about anything and everything these days, aren't they? You've got the Deadpool ones, and you've got, is it Doctor Strange? Benedict Cumberbatch is Doctor Strange. You start thinking, I mean, nothing wrong with that, but they're kind of making a movie out of every superhero that ever graced the pages of a comic. I mean, why not Elric?
Elric's time will come. And I think that Moorcock has made a lot of money through options of Elric. Films, and it's never emerged.
Well, I think was it Stephen King that said the best thing that can ever happen to you as a novelist is that they buy the rights to one of your books and never make the film.
Never make it,
You get the money, but they don't get the chance to ruin it.
If you're interested in the final programme, I do urge you to listen to Mr. Jim Moon's Hypnagogia. He talks in some depth about the film. It is utterly balmy, actually. But you'll have to watch it and enjoy it. So I think that's one thing before we go for Jerry Cornelius. We should say, do you know how Jerry Cornelius got his name?
I have a feeling you're going to tell me.
It was actually the name of a greengrocer. That's real.
That's not true.
It is true.
That's not true. You're making a fool of me in a podcast now, aren't
you? that is a Moorcockian fact.
It was a greengrocer. Really? A proper greengrocer?
Yeah.
You just own a corner shop? Are you bending the truth?
It's just one of those great bits of synchronicity. Anyway, we're going to get through that hatch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And take with you the Ruby Throne and the final programme and enjoy that.
He's done very well for himself, Michael Moorcock, hasn't
he?
Yeah. For a greengrocer.
See you later, Blythy.
See you, Dirk.
POSTBAG! My social media channel of choice is Twitter. I'm on @thegrognardfile, where there's a community of gamers, old gamers, exchanging stories and images from playing back in the day. Here is a Stormbringer anecdote from Ian Griffiths. I don't really remember much about our Stormbringer campaign, except it was hijacked by a local nutter. A friend of a friend of a friend heard we were playing and had read a bit of Elric. As far as I know, he'd never gamed before. We were playing at my mate's mum's house and she let him in. 15 minutes later, he'd taken over games mastering the game, Hitcher style. It was a weird mix of psychodrama, psychedelia, with just a hint of Young Kingdoms. He also kept plainly stating that if we died in the game, he was going to kill us in real life. We were lucky he didn't understand Stormbringer at all, or else we'd have been in trouble. I remember we spent a few hours real time walking through a chaos marsh that was peppered with stepping stones made of fossilized dinosaur fetuses. We had 1% chance of dying each step, and he literally made us do it 100 times each, with the understanding that he would kill us for real if we failed. It was the most terrifying night of our lives. At some point, he went out to the shop, and we were so terrified that we pretended to be out. Lights off, music off, lying on the floor. After a few minutes, the doorbell stopped buzzing, and I was so desperate for the loo, I crawled on my hands and my knees to the upstairs toilet, only to see him wheedling his way in through the bathroom window. He then marched me downstairs, and we did another 2 hours, rolling individual steps through the marsh. This time, I think he'd dropped some LSD, so if anything, it was weirder and more terrifying. And that's the only thing I really remember about gaming Stormbringer, which is slightly sad, as we had scores of really great nights playing it. Blimey, Charlie, thanks for that, Ian. Sheesh. Meanwhile, over at the blog, thegrognardfiles.com, comes this less terrifying encounter from Frank. I believe it was in 1998 that I attended my first ever fantasy convention in the USA, Leprechaun or Coppercon, in Phoenix, Arizona. I'd been to conventions, more like meetups, in Germany before, but this was the real deal, and I tried to get as many new experiences in as possible. Determined to try an RPG that I hadn't played before, I signed up for a game of Tunnels and Trolls. The games master was a nice man in his mid-40s, I guessed, wearing a fedora hat. After a short rules explanation of about 10 minutes, our party, one member of which was a young girl of about 18, the daughter of the games master as it turned out, was off to its adventure. And it was awesome. We had about a 3-hour romp through a dungeon with much hilarity and action. To this day, I fondly remember that fun adventure and the RPG of Tunnels and Trolls. You will have guessed by now that the games master was none other than Ken St. Andrew. Thanks for that, Frank. There's a Tunnels and Trolls Grognard file coming soon. When it comes to building fun into RPGs, Ken St. Andrew is the master. Since the last podcast, we've reached our first Patreon goal of producing a PDF magazine or fanzine later in the year. If you want to support the podcast and become an honorary member of the Armchair Adventurers Club, then please head over to patreon.com/thegrognardfiles, where you can see a short film that I'm very proud of that explains everything. So thank you to Joe Glavin and Callum from coming on board. Callum is the host of Rollist podcast. I'll put a link on the show notes. It's a lively RPG program in a magazine format, and he went to Dragonmeet as well, and he made some great content there. So if you want to compare our experiences, then please give it a listen. Joining the Armchair Adventurers at $3.50 level is Andrew Cousins and Fred Kish, which means they'll get a hard copy of the fanzine if we reach that goal. Rick Knott has also boosted himself to this level. Thanks, guys. As a special thanks to those who have pledged $5, I'm going to award them something special from a table. This time, they're going to get a mutation from the Animal Mutations table that appears in the Hawkmoon game. Okay, so first up is Andrew Jones, who I still owe a pint for recognising me at Dragonmeet. I've not forgotten. There's certain licensing issues to overcome, yada yada yada. I need to thank you too for pointing me towards the Cerebus, the Aardvark comic strip, which featured Elrod, the albino. Thanks for your support. And I'm going to give you... you've got Luminescence. So enjoy glowing in the dark, Andrew. Thank you. Matthew Broom has pledged $5 a month, and as a result, he now has a strong pheromone. He is indeed a strange attractor. Chris Sharp has joined at $5, and he has natural camouflage. So if anyone finds him, pass on my thanks. So that's the end of the Stormbringer episode. Again, I'd like to come back to it once I've had a chance to play some of the later editions and to talk about Chaosium's Magic World. But the next episode is about a game. You may have heard of it. It's called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It's going to be a big topic. Daily Dwarf is burning the midnight oil, trying to find the best from White Dwarf. And the Armchair Adventurers have had a long and complicated relationship with AD&D, which we'll explain. And we're trying to work out how to tackle this huge subject in an interesting and meaningful way. And so as a result, the next one might be a bit later than the 4-week cycle that we've been aiming for so far. But we will have it out at before the end of next month. In the meantime, I'm going to put on my fedora, my fur coat, paint my nails black, pack my needle gun, and fire up the Phantom. Until next time, adios amigos.